Spinning. Hello, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Advocacy. Of course, I'm Paula, the founder. Bunny is going to be on. We're having technical difficulties. As you guys know, a storm came through this area, so she will be joining us. But in the meantime, I want to introduce Miss Shawnice. I didn't have your last name, Shawnice, but
Hendrix.
what was your last name? I'm sorry.
Hendrix.
Hendrix. Okay, here we go, Bunny. Here's my other co-host, Bunny. And then we have Shawnice Hendrix with Empower SPED. So buckle in, sit back, and enjoy this podcast because Shawnice has a lot to share with us, and we are sitting on the edge of our seat. We're excited to hear. So, with that being said, Shawnice, take over. Tell us about yourself, and then tell us about Empower SPED.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm Shanice. I am from Baltimore, Maryland. I am the founder and solo non-attorney advocate with Empower SPED. And what I do at Empower SPED is I help families navigate the IEP and special education process. I started my journey because my son has an IEP. So in 2018, when I just entered the school building, I realized that it was going to be a huge challenge getting my son an IEP and the services that he needed. So it was a long journey, very tumultuous, very painful at times, a lot of tears, but I will say I know that I'm in this space now because of everything I went through. And so I am empowered to help families, one family at a time, if I can, really navigate the special education process so that their children get the services that they need.
I love that you said one family at a time. I love that.
I agree. I like that too. Because you're not trying to speed through. I like that. Um, Shanice, tell us about your son. Tell if you don't mind sharing his diagnosis, his age, and everything.
Sure. So my son is a twin, and he is 12. We started this journey. Both of my twins were micro preemies, so I kind of was in a realm of medical and clinicians and things like that. So my son has a diagnosis of hemiplegia, which is a form of cerebral palsy, hydrocephalus, as well as ADHD due to environmental factors, and processing and coordination disorder. So he's a lot of different things that make him unique and made his educational journey even more challenging, because my son is definitely one of those students. When you look at him and when you talk to him, you don't see a disability, so to speak. So that was a huge eye opener because coming from a great medical team, I've really just assumed that the school system and everybody would believe me and would, be able to follow along. But as I'm going through this journey, and as we all know, everyone who has a disability, it shows up different. Like there is a spectrum and a range to all types of diagnosis. So no one person is ever really the same. There are a lot of maybe similarities, but my son was in a situation where he was very unique because he speaks very well. He has a high IQ, but he's not able to process on paper. So there was a huge disconnect, and I was fighting to prove that he needed the services a lot of the time. And that took 3 years. I was fighting for 3 years.
Wow. What does processing disorder look like? What is that?
So for him, he is unable to maybe write out on paper or answer a question on paper. So you can ask him something auditorily and he'll be able to give you a synopsis. He is into theater and music. So anything like that, you can ask him, or even a math problem, you can ask him out loud to give you the answer. However, he is unable to follow those steps or processes in real time. So he's the type of student who can tell you how to cross the street, but if you were to have him do it on his own, he might get a little confused. So that just makes him really unique. He also has dysgraphia and dyscalculia, which are, challenges with math and writing. Again, he's a great speaker. He is very intelligent, but to be able to put it on paper or put it in real time, where he's supposed to make a product of something, that's challenging.
So you would have to, so would that be put into his IEP to make those accommodations that he may be able to verbally give a response more so than writing it down?
So for his IEP, a lot of our accommodations definitely come from making sure that he has the opportunity to strengthen, like use what his strengths are. So of
Mhm.
course, speaking, he at times when he was really young, not so much now because he's older, he's able to write, but when he was really young, he had a scribe. And in school, if he were taking a test or were to write a paper, he would then speak it to his aide. It could be the teacher, maybe a one to one, really depending on, and then they would scribe it for him.
Oh, wow.
He
Okay.
was learning to type and edit on a computer. We would use speech to text technology. So he would be speaking into the text and then he would edit it and type it that way. Um, so that's we just really use a lot of different ways to help him have a successful day. And his goals, though, are eight for him to write, for him to be able to self advocate for himself in certain times. So, whether it's taking a break or really having a moment to process what is being asked of him, and then he's able to produce the work. So, he's also in a non public placement school, which allows him to have that freedom to kind of go at his own pace.
Yeah, that makes a big difference.
For sure.
It does seem like that would be something that is very hard to diagnose. Was that the case early on?
I had a great team. I'm gonna say this. I had a great clinical team. And because he was a micropreemie and he had hydrocephalus and the cerebral palsy, his specialist recommended that we go through the IEP process.
Hmm.
So I was more so shocked with him having such a laundry list, for lack of better terms, of diagnosis. And I assumed that when we got to the school system, they would be able to look at that and say, yes, this is a student who has so many different varying medical conditions that would impede his ability to learn. But that was not the case. So it really started making me think about like, okay, these are two entities that all of us kind of pass through, right? Like we see doctors, we see clinical specialists. For me, I was saying PT and OT. He was getting speech and language at a children's hospital. And then so I assumed that when we got to the school, the IEP would have been just like almost written and given to us. And that was
Mm.
not the case at all. That was
Mm.
far from the truth. So that was very disappointing and upsetting because I had that clinical team really supporting me, really encouraging me and saying, we know that he's going to be a student that's going to have challenges. So get on the ball now. And I did everything that, in essence, I was told to do, certainly blind, because Google's overwhelming. It's a lot of different things that you don't really know when you're first like, what is an IEP? And you get the basic definition of it, but
Mhm.
the process itself is what you cannot necessarily find through Google. And you're not prepared for the experience sometimes with the school system.
Mhm.
So that like it took me for it, oh my gosh, it was crazy. It was
It sounds
crazy.
like all of our parents. I
Mhm.
think, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
sure.
So moving forward with Empower SPED, tell us because I can see where this is going. I can see how it started off, the frustration, the fight, trying to bring his diagnosis into the schools so that they can understand that the diagnosis, that the medical diagnosis is going to affect him educationally. Tell us how that started, sped this process up, and how you knew, okay, I got to do something.
Honestly, it was everyone around me. It was my husband, it was other friends, it was other people really encouraging me to help others, like reach back and help others, because there were so many families going through the same thing that I was going through. Um, and it wasn't that I didn't necessarily have the confidence. I just didn't think that Empower SPED could be what it is today. It really wasn't a part of my mind. I do know that in the beginning, and I would say maybe in 2020, I kept saying to myself, I know I'm not the only parent going through this. And if I'm spending all of my time, in essence, educating myself, I went through trainings, I had joined, the advocacy world is very small. So I had joined some professional affiliations, and I still kept thinking, like, there are so many parents, no matter what their demographic background is, they just do not know what they don't know. And the fact that the school systems are going year after year, allowing these students to pass or go through this and not really support. So that was really my only thing. Like, I have to find a way to reach back and help other parents, especially parents. Like, there's a lot of support out there, but sometimes if you don't meet certain qualifications, you don't get the help. So I was also in that avenue. Like, my income was not in a space where I could get some of the free help, but I didn't see myself. Like, I needed to see myself. I wanted somebody who was a parent, somebody who had been through it, and it was really hard to find myself. And my husband was like, "That's because you were it." So he was really the one who encouraged me and, like, treated me to my business license and all the things, because he was like, "No, you're going to do it. You were going to do it." Um, and
I
then,
love that he said that you were
yeah,
it. I love
yeah,
that.
he did. And then, really, when my mom transitioned 2 years ago, I was just like, "Hey, I'm gonna wing it. This is what I have to do, and I have to kind of carry on her legacy." So that's really what Empower SPED, how it got started. It wasn't me; it was everyone around me encouraging me, and then reminding me that I'm good at what I do. So
Come
I
on now. That's
yeah,
right.
I love it.
I have been successful in many ways that I don't really talk about as much as I should, but
Mhm.
it is really something that I'm passionate about. And Empower SPED is now going to be an empire that is really going to serve at the pleasure of our students. And that's my motto. We serve at the pleasure of the students, because they don't get this time back. And I'm helping parents navigate, very uncharted, sticky territory. So Empower SPED is really just that guiding light to help any and everyone,
Are
honestly.
you in the schools or do you mainly just help parents?
I mainly help parents. I'm
Okay.
not in the schools as far as a relationship with them. I have been invited to schools to come speak and maybe host at some fairs, which is really great, but I'm not connected with schools at all. So I help parents. Parents will contract my services out.
Okay. Awesome.
And I like that because I think what is it, the goal that we all have is to get our kids exactly what they need. And I think we've talked about this several times, how a lot of our kids are written off,
Mhm.
almost like, oh, they are not capable of doing this. And they're given little to no help. And I think for me, I will say I join in what you say, Shawnice, as far as when you were thrust into this. And none of us expected to have special needs individuals. None of us knew what to expect when they went to the school system. So we were trying to just feel our way in the dark. But at some point, you start saying something doesn't add up, something's not
Mhm.
adding up, you know. And when you start getting that feeling, I would say to any parent, go with your gut, go with your gut instinct, and then get the help that you need. And I think, again, the reason why we started advocacy is because most of us needed the help, but we just did not know where to find it.
Mhm.
We did not know how to go about getting it. And I love the fact that you're here and you're offering the parents to help. My question is, how do the parents know about you? The parents that have reached out to you, how did they know who you were? Was it word of mouth, or how did that work?
It was word of mouth and social media. I have a lot of clients that I build very, very close relationships with them. So I tell all of my clients when they on board, I am a part of their village. And with that, I have earned other clients just on a referral basis. So right now, it is word of mouth, and social media some, but really because the majority of my parents who honestly have been in my like me, I was in their situation. They were just in a space where I need help. I know that it doesn't feel right when I'm in these team meetings and I know what I don't know, but I also want someone who's been through it and I can trust. So that's really where I'm gaining my clients from word of mouth. But I'm hoping to expand and certainly get out there on social media because I know, especially this school year, there are a lot of things that I'm learning in my teams that I'm like, okay, this is a problem. This is a systemic issue that I need to kind of highlight and say out loud so parents know to come and get support with Empower SPED, and even build community amongst each other. I think sometimes us as parents with, children with learning differences and disabilities and medical diagnosis, we kind of operate in silo because we sometimes are so overwhelmed, right? Like
Yes.
I even think about my personal relationships and connections and how they have kind of strayed away because I've been in therapy, I'm in occupational therapy, speech therapy. I'm just got kind of going through it. And it's just different, sometimes. And I also have two other children. So managing and balancing that. So I really just am coming from a space of, let's talk, let's figure out what's going on. Let me see how I can support you, and really encourage you to let you know that you're not alone because the journey does not begin or end with me. And I really want parents to know, like, I'm just a part of the way. I'm just a pit stop along the way.
I love that. It definitely takes the community. So having that community connection is what connected me with some of the parents at my grandson's school. Because one parent, she went around and collected everyone's phone numbers, and we kind of kept in touch. We text back and forth just to follow up, to encourage, or just to provide any type of resources or information. So building that community connections is very important. And it also helps you to be able to be a help to someone, to
Hmm.
not what the young people say now is gatekeep. You know,
Right.
you can share knowledge. So
Yep.
I really love that, being connected, to be able to share the knowledge, share resources, get resources. So it's important. I love everything that you're doing with Empower Spirit. I love it.
Yes, thank you. And to your point of gatekeeping, sometimes when I'm in conversations with my clients about the investment that they're making, I'm also letting them know, like, I'm going to go for bat for you. And there are a lot of things that outside of the knowledge piece that I'm able, just in my experience, just because I am very familiar with the law, I familiarize myself with every procedural aspects in each state that I work in. But I'm here to help ease the process for you. My goal is to get the IEP as close to perfect as possible so that when it's time for you to expand, or you say, like, my student's older, they've graduated, whatever the reason may be, you're able to still support them. And that IEP is solid and it changes year after year. Like nothing stays the same, but really getting people to understand that it's not only the knowledge that I'm sharing, but it's the action of making sure the schools are doing what they need to do. Are the services really getting your child what they need? Um, Sometimes I'm in the team meetings and a lot of the back and forth is not necessarily whether the student is getting, for example, a reading intervention. It is, what program are we using and how do we know that this works for this student? Like,
Oh,
how do
wow.
we know it's going to work for this student? Because we don't want to keep wasting 2 years, a year and a half trying to figure it out when we have things in place, especially with IDEA, which is a federal like law. That is the federal thing that holds the IP together. But we don't have to wait till the end of the school year. We don't have to wait till the annual review to know that something is working. and I know it's challenging on the schools. Like I'm not here to bash them too much, but
Mhm.
I know it is challenging. But sometimes their scripts and their gatekeeping, for lack of better terms,
Mhm.
does really negatively impact the students.
Absolutely.
They
I,
have
I
that
definitely
cookie
agree.
cutter,
Yep.
those cookie cutter IEPs, and I think I know for a fact with my daughter, I know she had a cookie cutter because it had someone else's name on it.
Mm,
So, it's stuff like that that it's like, okay, you're not gonna just keep using the
copy and
same
paste it.
goals. Yeah,
Yep.
for her and for everybody else. And
Hmm.
another thing too for me is understanding, and we continue to say this, but parents are a crucial part of the team. Parents are a crucial part of the team. Parents' input does matter. But
Yep.
I
Hmm.
think sometimes I know when I first went into it, and I say this all the time, I was never educated on this process. So it's almost like parents, you either have to educate yourself on this process or you have to get with someone like Shanice to help you. First and foremost, you can't really be an advocate for your child if you don't understand.
That's
Hmm.
right.
And I think first and foremost, you need to understand that document can be overwhelming because I know my
Hmm.
daughter was like 60 pages back and forth. And so, who's going to sit down and read through that and fully understand it? And when the schools bring you in from the time she entered the school system, no one sat me down and went over that document
Hmm.
to say, this is
They
how this
hand you
goes.
the procedural rights.
Yep.
Exactly.
They give you all the paperwork to read, and depending on what part of the process you're in, you've already kind of shut it down because I know for me in the beginning, and I had to really whip myself into shape. I was so emotional. I
Yeah.
was so emotional about like my son is behind. I was holding on to all of these milestones that he didn't meet, and it was blinding me from really getting the knowledge that I needed or even knowing to ask the questions because I was emotional. I was so emotional in those team meetings. So sometimes I would leave the meeting not getting the answer that I wanted because I forgot to ask because I'm holding back a tear. Yeah, I'm
Mhm.
holding back this frustration because I also don't want to show up as a particular parent. So when I
Say that one again. You got to
Mhm.
show up
Yeah, you
as
gotta
a
show
as
up,
a.
but you don't wanna be
Yep.
labeled. You
Yep.
don't want to, like the tensions are high. Like, it can be very thick in those team meetings.
Mhm.
If it's your first one, like for my son, because of all of his medical diagnosis, I was not privy to the fact that maybe 7 people were going to be in the meeting and it felt like them versus me.
Hmm.
And I just kind of froze. I was just like, well, I don't know what to say. I didn't realize my parent statement could have been written up, that I didn't have to say things verbatim, that I could have really typed a lot of my thoughts and my words, and they had to put in the IEP. I didn't know that there were notes. I didn't know that there were a lot of little things that could just ease the experience. And so that's really what Empower SPED does as well. Like when I onboard my families, I am giving knowledge sharing with them. I also am encouraging them to understand like it is not your fault that you didn't know all of these things that I'm sharing with you. Because sometimes that comes as a shock too. Like
Yeah.
I've noticed that a lot of families, they're kind of like, oh my gosh, if I would have just known this before, or I didn't know I could have done this. And
Yeah.
I'm just like, it's okay. You don't know what
Yeah.
you don't know. Know that the schools know what you don't know, but nobody can fault you for that.
Right.
So, what I'm encouraging you to do is take your seat. You are the head of the table because you know your child the best. And a lot of the times I tell my families, especially if they have to go to team meetings without me, let the schools kind of run those meetings to a degree, but you ask questions, you don't sign anything, and you can stop and pause and say, I don't feel comfortable. This is not what I want. But additionally, being able to really just tell the team, can you say this to me in a parent friendly language? Can you kind of share something with me? Or if they're sharing things about your student and then you like, this doesn't seem like my child, or I know my child is this way, are those skills transferable? That's what I ask my families. Are those skills transferable? If they're doing something in school, can you in essence duplicate it at home?
Hmm.
And we
Mm-hmm.
know, of course, kids are going to show up differently at home than they are, in school sometimes. But some of those basic skills that we may have written as goals, it should be
I
transferable
agree.
where you
I
are.
agree.
It should show up
Absolutely.
at some point.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
I remember in a team meeting for my son, and this was right before I started recording him. So I would record him and then I would take it to the IEP team meeting. So the same way I was sharing with you about his processing, I was sharing with them like it is hard for him to do this on paper. Like he is not, whatever you're saying he's doing, I'm telling you, he can't do it because when I asked him, it's not working. And we were kind of going back and forth. So I recorded it. Then I had our next team meeting and I showed them the recording. And I was like, now, can we explain this? I did everything that you all said
Mhm.
verbatim. He cannot do it. Now what? And getting parents to understand that their data of their student
I wish I
is
could
just
bring up
as
David.
it is, it
That's
carries the
right.
same weight.
That's
Everything
right.
from classroom observations, formal testing, parent input, meaning sample work from home that the child is
Mhm.
doing, counts as data. Clinical, now, sometimes the clinical notes and the medical records they don't always accept, but things from that you as the parent
Yep.
know that your child is able to do or not able to do, add all of that in the IEP because that is the data. That is what helps create those goals and those present levels. And sometimes the data can be contradictory. Sometimes you'll find that your student shows up and appears differently, but sometimes we can't get there unless we have the parents really sharing their side and the schools really taking proper notes,
Yeah.
making sure that they're being informative, providing data, whether it's formal or informal.
The first time that I wrote something in the parent input portion of the IEP, I challenged the teacher's data. I didn't trust it. I felt that they were exaggerating the data for their records to make, I guess the school year and records look good. And I challenged it and I wrote it out. I put all the parent concerns. I went each section in the IEP. If they said that he could independently do something, to me, of course, I had to Google, like, in their term, what does independently mean? So once I found out what that word meant in the special education world, I pulled him to the side. I laid out everything and I said, now find this, let's find that. And in my mind, if he could not independently do that, then that was not correct that they put in the IEP. So once I really challenged that and put it in there, I was like, okay, this is acceptable. We have a voice. We could actually add to the IEP. If we don't agree, we can add to the IEP. I had no idea that you can add something to the IEP because they don't let you know that. You go in these
Nope.
meetings, they are really just talking to you at you and letting you know they just going through the IEP, but they are not really letting parents know that you have a say so. If you don't agree, you can actually, there is a section in there that says parent input. And when I stopped, and of course I had to Google a lot of things, I realized from my parent concerns, I would write on the top said, please include these parent concerns in the IEP. And I did that every year. If I had issues, I would just send in that. We would have a meeting. But parents don't know that they have a right and that they have a
Not at
voice
all.
to add that information because the school will. I'm not saying all teachers, but they do tend to exaggerate the data
A lot of
because
times of
it's
not. Yep.
yeah, it's data driven. Like these results, they looking at the data like, oh, you're doing really good with this class. Like, but honestly, you're not because if you can't duplicate those that still skill that they performed in the classroom at home, then it's not something that they accomplished. It's
Hmm.
not successful.
But if you
And
remember,
reading the data is
mhm,
challenging
that
sometimes.
data, yeah, that data is
And
Yeah.
definitely
parents
confusing.
don't know that they can get it in parent friendly language. So the teachers and the school has to break down that
Hmm.
data. So if we're talking about, sometimes we get results from from those tests, those standard, not, they might not even be standardized, but they're a little bit more informal, but it may be something that the actual school is using. But that is, those results are still data driven. So if you're doing an iReady score and you give us a student a score of 146, well, what does that mean to the parent? I don't know what 146 means. What grade level is my child on, and what challenges are they on? Because reading is not just reading, right? Reading is
Comprehending.
fluency, it's phonics, it's comprehend, it's so many
Mhm.
components involved in reading. So if you're giving me this score and I don't know what to do with this score, where does that leave me? And Bunny, to your point, like, you actually looked at each section and Googled it. That is sometimes so overwhelming and daunting
Yes.
for parents. And I know that they don't even know that they can have their statement put in the IEP verbatim. I tell my parents all the time, we want to copy and paste. We're
That's
not
it.
interpret anything, and we're going to make sure that everything we have written in the parent statement is going to be addressed, whether it's this meeting or the next team meeting.
Mhm.
I am a team person. I will meet 5 times a year. That's just how I like to do it. I just think we avoid and eliminate so many things when we meet frequently. I know it's a little challenging and daunting, but we can ease up when the parents feel like everything is okay. And honestly, because kids change so much, I don't even recommend that. At
Mm-mm.
minimum, I tell my parents, like, you need to be at the IEP team meeting at least 3 times a year,
Mm-hmm.
at least three. And if you're not gonna exercise using the summer and to count that three before school starts, you send that letter saying you want to have a team meeting immediately. Don't even wait. Then we have another one mid-year, and then we have one at the end of the year.
I like that.
Yes, I
I
love it.
like that. I wish I had. I'm serious. It's a lot of things for Morgan. Again, I feel like you say how the parents beat themselves up. I beat myself up to the utmost because
Mhm.
once my daughter came out of the school system and went to private placement, she was 10. I A lot of time had been wasted. I was upset, but I also felt like that's where advocacy started because
Mhm.
of the level of frustration that I have. I still to this day do not feel like I have the IEP process down. I don't know if anybody ever will, but I know I won't. So for me, that's where I like to meet people who can teach me. And that's what I tell
Mhm.
parents now. If nothing else you take from this, start while your kids are young. I would
Mhm.
say before you go to your very first IEP meeting, hire Shanice. I'm serious. It's going to
Absolutely.
be worth it because I
Yes.
say this. They don't tell you, and I know Crystal says it all the time, our young special needs, our kids grow up to be adults. And if you don't get the help that they need, what's going to happen is your child's going to graduate from school and your child's going to, all of the things that they should have worked on when they were younger, it's going to just continue to build on its building
Mhm.
blocks. And they're just going to continue to go further and further down.
Yep.
Another thing that I would do, and I think, Bunny, we talked about this at our last podcast. We talked about challenging the data because I was one that when they said the data, like you say, Shawnees, it's confusing because I saw this graph. I just saw this graph with just lines on it. I didn't know what it meant. I would like you challenge something that they told me Morgan could identify all the letters of the ABC. I taped it at home. I said,
Yep.
and I said, let me show you what you said she can do.
Mhm.
Now, if she can do that, I'm not like you. I feel like something she's gonna do at school that she's not gonna do at home. But at the
Mhm.
same time, for Morgan, Morgan loves the sense of accomplishment. So for me, when I asked her, I put all the alphabets down and I had her to pick this up. Morgan, show me an
Yep.
A. Morgan, show me a C. She didn't know a C from a D. She didn't
Mhm.
know a D from a Y. And I took that right back to them and I said, your data is
Yep.
incorrect. So that's
Yep.
another thing, parents, I would say to you. A lot of the times the schools push data in your face.
Mhm.
Data, data, data. It seems overwhelming because it seems like, wow, they got to know what they're doing. That's what I thought. They got to know what they're doing. In fact,
Yeah.
a lot of that data was fraudulent.
Yep.
It was fraudulent.
Yep.
So when
Yep.
they talk about data is driving this, put them to the test. And you know, one thing that I did do too, aside from taping it at home, because they were saying, well, she could do this at home, I did pop-up visits. And I said, let me see how you guys are working with her in the class. And she didn't see me. So I want you to show me how you all are saying she can do this, that, and in between. If I'm behind a glass and she don't see me, then I
Right.
should see her doing it. She couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
when we are writing, and to your point, when we are writing the IEPs and we are creating goals and specifically SMART goals, I encourage the school teams and the parents as well. Let's break down this goal. A great goal is written with certain milestones and indicators throughout that yearly
Hmm.
goal, right? So even if, I mean, you're required by IDEA to provide progress notes quarterly. So even if we break it down quarterly to how close are we to what milestones are we putting in place to get to this goal? What is the instructional level? What are the programs that we're using? And I get a lot of pushback from the schools. Oh, I can't say this, I can't see that. Well, why not? Because if I were to take my IEP to the moon, I should be able to translate it to the aliens on the moon to say my student,
No, that's right.
that's what I say. Like, every state operates differently, but the IEP should be able to follow that student wherever they're going. So even with the data, I encourage families, exercise your right to have evaluations. I know evaluations are daunting. I know that they're a lot for the students. I know it's asking a lot for your student to kind of sit down and do hours of testing. But if you were unsure about that data, if you were just like, I'm not, X for those evaluations once a year, because it's going to get you as close as possible to giving you that, if they're done correctly, and that's like a whole nother rabbit hole, but it will give you that realistic picture of where your student is, grade level, and it kind of speaks to maybe some of the things that are going on in the classroom, some of the things that you're seeing at home, seeing if there's just a need, but it also highlights the student's strengths. I think sometimes I have been in meetings, to your point, where we've getting all this data and they're like, yes, your student is doing good, but then the goals are still being repeated. Well, if we're doing good, why are we still repeating the goals? Or why aren't we challenging my student to do more and to do better? And that's also a part of the IEP, which parents don't know. It's not the bare minimum, it's not baseline. Once they accomplish that goal, what is the next goal? How can
That's
we
that's it.
to, maintain where they are? Accessing a free, appropriate public education. That is FAPE. And that is what we have to do in our IEP. So I always say, ask for evaluations and put that in writing. Do not ask for it in person. Don't ask the special education coordinator, in the office or on your way. Put it in writing. And when you put things in writing, it kind of starts the clock. And there are a
Yep.
lot of things that the school has to abide by when you put in writing. And it's in that procedural guideline. And sometimes those books are thick. You don't want to read that. I get it. So, even for my parents, I break down that book for them as well, because this is something that you should not have to spend hours and hours trying to understand. Because even that jargon is very, legal, very teacher centered, school centered. So some of that can be challenging, and even interpreting the law can be challenging. But again, parents don't know what they don't know. And the schools are very aware of what you don't know as a parent.
Mhm.
And I will say, on the end of just supporting the schools, because not all schools are in a non-compliance or having procedural violations. A lot of them are. I would say 90%. Um, but they are overwhelmed with the volume of students that
Hmm.
have IEPs. And really, my thing is, like, I want to come in to make this team as strong as possible, because we serve at the pleasure of said student. We are
Hmm.
sitting here at this table to make sure that this student has the best experience possible. And I do understand that sometimes one teacher may have 7 kids with an IEP. And I even tell the parents, I'm not telling you to be sympathetic to that. But if I can help you on the back end, working with Empower SPED to kind of make your IEP process a little bit different, because sometimes when we have those schools that are very overwhelmed, they want the
Yeah.
parents to ask and give, because it just makes it easier for them. So, if
Yeah.
you find yourself in that type of team, I tell parents all the time, let's take advantage of it, because we have their ears and we're listening. That is a very rare experience, though, I will say. I think the schools, because of the volume of students that they have, everybody, on a hamster wheel, they just try and push you through and get the student through. It seems like in the state of Maryland, because of a lot of historical challenges that have had happened in Maryland with education, I just found a lot of students getting passed through. They have an IEP, they go into the next grade, but it is widening the gap of where they're learning is not. And then it's causing a lot of emotional turmoil for the parents. Like, I have a student who, parents would say, I have a student who's in seventh, eighth grade, and they still in the first grade level, but they have an IEP.
They
And
got pushed through.
they just getting pushed through. But again, that copy and pasting the data, getting the data in late, parents not knowing the time. It's so many different little things that can make or break the experience. It's just like having a draft IEP prior to the team meeting is required in the state of
Mhm.
Maryland. So when it's not done, you're leaving the parents at a disadvantage. So they're just coming in listening to what you're saying. They're coming in just kind of, okay, whatever the school says, then that may be okay. I know my child isn't doing well, but this is what the school says, or this is what they only offer. Or my favorite one is, we don't do a one-to-one. That's my favorite line. And I'm just like, okay, you sure? Put it in writing. Let me see the regulation on that. And I do understand that sometimes a one-to-one can be overwhelming for all the other students, but that's not what we're here for. We're here for this one student. If they need that, then let's prove to me why they don't. Another important thing for parents to always remember, if they don't take anything away from what I'm saying today, when you leave your team meeting, you make sure you have a prior written notice.
That's
That
right.
summary, that is everything you need, and if the notes are taken correctly, everything you asked for and what the responses were, all of the data that was written in and what the responses were. And furthermore, if you were told no, the prior written notice, if written well, should be able to explain an alternative. This was the reason no, this is the data that proves it, and this is an alternative to what the parent asked. That's not happening.
It
Mm.
happened one time for my grandson, and I
Okay.
think it was because the teacher, he had a certified special education teacher who was very knowledgeable on how to write IEPs and the
Yeah, written.
PWNs. Yep,
Mm-hmm.
she knew how to write it, and I was shocked. I said, "Oh wow, I've never seen one like this before." So she said, "Oh, you're supposed to get this all the time," and
Mm-hmm.
I had never gotten it like that. And when you talked about reading those safeguard procedurals that they send you, the parent rights and things like that, I sat and I flipped through that one day. I flipped through that. I flipped through that 53-page IEP. I just cried.
Mm-hmm.
It is very overwhelming,
It
and
is.
they really expect for you to read those documents and understand them prior to coming to these meetings. And it's so unfair. It is unfair. But I flipped through
Mm-hmm.
those documents. It was so overwhelming.
And I
It
would
really
even
was.
say, like, before you, like you said, Paula, hire me, reach
Yep.
out to me, because let me say
Mhm.
this. We have, and a lot of times in my experience, you request an IEP team meeting, especially if it's your first one. You request an IEP team meeting, but you're not giving those safeguards until the day of the meeting,
Yep.
while you're in real time, and you don't know that you can request one prior to. So that's also expecting a parent to understand their rights in real time, when the
Mhm.
only thing they did was just ask for a team meeting. That's the only thing they did. So it's so much information in there. The timelines are in there, but the
Yep.
parents don't know. And then again, if you leave that team meeting feeling defeated, you can forget looking through that sometimes, because you're just defeated, right?
Yep.
Like, they told me no, or we have to come back, or they said not right now. It's just so many different things, and you find yourself waiting. I know that was for me. It didn't start getting egregious with my son until I went to a training with Disability Rights Maryland, and I created a chart because I was just in that training and my mouth was to the floor. I was writing all these notes, and I can remember telling my husband, like, "Oh my gosh, they've been getting over on us. They've been getting over on us. We don't even have the IEP established because we haven't determined eligibility." I had requested an IEP back in a team meeting back in August of 2018. That was when I initially registered him for school. Had no, it wasn't. I take that back. It was May. I registered him for school, and I was pregnant with my daughter. And they said we don't have team meetings during the summer. So I'm like, okay, we're gonna just meet when the school year starts, and whatever. I had my husband brought our baby to the meeting. They were like, we want to do observations. He's a new student. We've never met him before. Thinking in my mind, okay, we're gonna come back in 30 days. That was August. We did not meet again until April.
What?
That was because I had been going through the training. It was just a lot was not sitting right with me, but I was waiting for the team. In that April meeting, I had a diagram, and it showed the IEP process, and it showed all of the timelines for the state of Maryland. And I asked the team to circle where we were in the process, and they were so hesitant not even determine eligibility. And I was just like, you guys are like, this is my son.
Mhm.
This is he cannot get this time back. So we have gone from August to April,
April.
and I have asked, y'all have done observations. We haven't even done testing.
Where's the data?
Haven't even done testing. Well, we think he may be eligible for a 504. No, I don't want to hear that. I want to know what happened. And
You think?
yeah. And I was thinking to myself, how many other parents are y'all doing this to? How
All
many
of
other
them.
parents who are working, have multiple children, can't get to a team meeting, just so many other things going on? How what are y'all doing?
Not to
What are
mention, not to mention, a lot of the schools do not have capable staff. That's
mm-hmm,
an even bigger issue. A lot of the teachers there are pulled from here, there, and in between to work with our children, and a lot of them are not certified to
Not
work with our
qualified.
kids. They're
Not
not.
knowledgeable.
Yeah.
they are not. And it is, I guess special education teachers are rare. They seem
Yeah,
like
they
they're always
are.
one. It seems like it's always just one or two, maybe in a school building, depending
Yep.
on the size of the school building. But it's interesting that they can't even really use some of the gifts that they have and that they acquire as a special educator in their public setting because they're so overwhelmed.
They're
And it's
overwhelmed.
only one of them. And they are going to do the bare minimum sometimes with, or if you build a good rapport,
Mhm.
sometimes you see a better outcome. Like
Mhm.
my son had a great special educator when we were in first grade, but again, things were so egregious, it was still impeding on what she could do because she was like, I work for the school, I can't really tell my boss that, we not, and those type of things were occurring. But you're right, the special educators, you have reading specialists who kind of put in positions and they're
Yep.
managing the IEP, or you have a case manager.
Paraprofessionals. Hmm.
Sometimes the school teams have other staff who are the IEP chairs and they don't have a background in special
Yeah.
education. And that makes it very challenging because their caseload, I know in some settings here, you have the vice principal acting as the IEP chair. So
Yeah.
what is the job description of a vice principal, number one, and then you're making them the IEP chair? So
Yeah.
that's
It's just
that's not a lot of
terrible.
focus. How can they focus?
Yeah, and
They
they
so
can't even deal with what they're supposed to be dealing with. And I know my grandson, the school that he was in last year, one SPED teacher in the building with 17 autistic students.
mm,
It was a lot, and I gave her grace and space because
hmm,
it wasn't her fault, and I
yeah,
really showed love and never took anything out on her. I made it a school issue, but my fight was for him.
hmm,
Although the other students in there needed help, I had to fight for my grandson. But I also had in mind, if I fight for him and looking at his IEP, whatever changes and resources I can provide for him to bring into the class, it benefits the whole class. But
Absolutely.
then there comes a time when you've got to stop to say it's time to pull him out.
Hmm.
You know, love you dearly, but it's time to go elsewhere to get support and resources. And it's just so unfortunate that we've got so many children being diagnosed right now with learning disabilities and autism and everything, and we don't have the staff
Hmm.
that's able to properly support our children. And I think the system needs to pay more, and that's an issue as well. And you know, if they're sending the gym teacher in to cover the autistic classroom,
Yeah.
it's crazy. So the state of Maryland, all of these states and counties and districts, they really need to look at, you know, what are we providing? Can we offer a little bit more, at least to a SPED teacher, certified as teacher or something? It's just so unfortunate that parents don't know and the teachers don't know, but they are in these classrooms.
Hmm. And you have so, I mean, to your point, you have so many students with these diagnoses and the spectrum. All disabilities to me even like have a spectrum of how a
Yes,
student may
indeed.
present, and sometimes things may not manifest until a certain point. And if we're like, it's almost like everybody's on the assembly line because of the lack of staffing and the volume of students. There's more students than there are teachers, and with that, like Paula said, you get those cookie cutter IEPs, you get
Yep.
those, you know, we're just going to use one reading program that we favor and this is going to be it. And it's like, no, that's not how it's going to work. And the parents, again, they don't know that they can challenge this. How I need to see proof. Give me sample work. Show me
Yeah.
sample data. Show me in an assessment. Show me how um, this program that the school has chosen to use matches with the state of Maryland's data on everybody who has a similar profile than my child. And of course, that's data they have to research and get back to you, but it's supposed to be given to you. So if you can't prove that this particular reading intervention or speech and language, like whatever software intervention service you're using, is appropriate for my child, then we have to keep going back to the drawing board.
Oh
And
wow, I didn't know that you could ask for something like that.
oh yeah, you
Wow.
can, you know, there are a lot of programs that I've learned, and a lot of this I have learned just being in different team
Hmm.
meetings in different school districts. That some schools just have a preference on their reading intervention
Mm-hmm.
program, and
Mm-hmm.
they've only had one or two people trained on this program, and they're trying to get all the kids, whether you have autism, dyslexia, ADHD, another special, you know, specific learning disability. They're giving them this one reading intervention, and it doesn't work. And it doesn't work because not everybody is able to receive, or, you know, like for my son, he didn't do well with a lot of traditional reading programs. He had to get a mix of all kinds of reading programs, but I had to let him fail in order to prove my point. That was another
Mm-hmm.
pill that I had to swallow that I didn't want to, but I had to let him fail to prove a point because I
Mm-hmm.
knew I didn't really have the data. I don't speak the language of a educational, you know, administrator at that, because we're talking about understanding why the schools are making decisions for certain reading intervention programs or certain reading programs that they use for their class, you know, classroom teaching styles. But it was just like, I know this doesn't work for my son because of the way his brain functions. I can tell you it's not going to work. And then it was like, but how could I prove that? How could I prove that? Because I'm also trying to prove to a school system that my student, who is very articulate and can listen to a story and give you the summary, the conclusion, the author's point just by speaking it, but you ask him to write it, he can't write it. So
Mm.
I'm trying to prove all of these points. Um, but the training that I have gone through and you know, kind of being removed from certain spaces, and then the relationships that I have built, you know, I really ask like, well, how can we really narrow down what is appropriate, like what is going to be good? And it does require for me to ask the parents for a lot of patience. I never
Hmm.
tell my parents we're going to resolve something in one school year, because it's not likely, and it's not even that it may be the school's fault. Sometimes we're just trying to find what works best for your
The
student.
research. Yeah,
Yeah.
because that's what I was about to say. Some things, if they use something at the school and it's been working for everybody and that doesn't work for your child, now it comes down to us trying to do some
Mhm.
research to find what's going to work for our child. And that's I we did that with a speech for my daughter. My daughter is nonverbal. And I mean, to this day, I feel like we have not found the perfect speech when she's 20.
Mhm.
So now what I'm doing based off of our a podcast me and Bunny was a part of, I'm challenging the school. And I don't care if this is her last year in school or not. I want her to have the speech board that works for her. I don't
Mhm.
want a speech board that is on stock in the classroom or that's the perfect one that everybody is using in school. I don't care. I don't. And so for me, I feel like sometimes, and I was just talking to my sister the other day, and I was just, and my husband, just talking about how frustrated I was because I feel like Morgan's been in school all this time and I still don't have the perfect speech board for her. And
Mhm.
guess what? This
Yeah.
last year, they're going to find it.
Yeah.
I know
And
that's
you
right.
keep and
They're
you
going to
keep
find it.
going, and you like, let's what's the treasure chest? Give me the
Yeah.
treasure chest so I can pick from it,
Yeah.
and I can
Absolutely.
figure out, let's piecemeal it. A lot of the times it's interesting because we have parents, a lot of my clients, all of my clients, I'm not even gonna say a lot. I've been blessed to have clients who are 100% involved in their child's education.
Yeah.
So I'm not working with parents who I have to kind of drag and hold their hand. And I'm telling the school team, you can ask the parent to help. It's okay to say,
That's
look,
right.
we're going to try this, or I need for when you go home, let's see if this works, let's see if that works, because again, this is all data and we're all a team. So
Hmm.
it's not the IEP is not just academics, it follows the child to 21.
No.
It is about the holistic view of the child. What can we do? What can we do for the student? So sometimes it requires the parent to go out and do that research, to talk to other experts, to really kind of figure out, okay, what's working. And I tell my parents all the time, if you were connected to the hospital setting, if you were seeing anybody for any type of service, ask those clinicians what the other parents are doing.
That's
Get a
smart.
list of the software, right? Get a list of the services, get a list of any programs, and do some research. There are a lot of um professional I'm saying articles and literature on the benefits of these programs. And then sometimes you can say to the team, listen, I know that this school system has been very successful with the student that has my profile. Does my state offer this? If not, can we piecemeal it? What can we do to figure out how we can get this reading intervention or speech intervention, or to your point, assistive technology, so that your daughter can communicate? Can we build a system?
That's
Like,
right.
let's take advantage
Hmm.
of the professionals that are in the school system that are building these systems. Can you build a speech system that's specifically catered to my
Specific to her.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's
And I
right.
and I
will
know it
say
costs
too,
money, and I know, but this is what we're here for.
this what my
Yeah,
taxes pay.
Yeah,
I ain't
this
gonna
this
that's
keep
is
on
right.
everybody else and not get her what she needs. And I do say parents too, as much as possible. I agree with Shawnee's and Bunny 100%. Try to work with that school. Try not to be confrontational as much as
Yeah.
possible. Cause I ain't gonna lie, I get more from my Morgan school because I work with them. I mean,
That's
Mhm.
right.
I yeah, I don't just go in with the I'm gonna cuss you out and I'm gonna flip. I don't do all of that. You
Yeah.
have to go in with the mindset that you are part of the team, and then working with part of the team, like you say, Shawnee's, it can be a little tense at times, but I think ultimately, if you are a consistent part of that team and they see that, hey, you trying to get things done, you're not just trying to get
Mhm.
people fired. I'm trying to work with you guys. And listen,
Mhm.
I want to work with you all. I'm not trying to
And
come
ask,
and tell you.
what can I do? Like, I ask the parents all the time, when goals are being created specifically, when there are specific goals and we're writing out the instructional grade level that they're on, the program, the frequency, ask that school, how can I support them at home? How
Hmm.
can I make sure that I am doing the same thing that you are
That's
doing,
what I say.
to make
Yeah.
sure that if they bring work home, you have students who have extended time on their work. And if they have extended time on their work, whether it be a day, an extra hour, whatever the case may be, the parents need to know what you are doing. You can
That's
ask
right.
for training as a parent. A lot of parents don't know that. You can ask the team, can you train me on this system that you're
Mhm.
using? So if it's Orton Gilliam, which no, you're not a special educator, but you can get support on
Yeah.
learning the ins and outs of that system. If they're using IXL, I know like all of these platforms that the students are using that are kind of solely based on their computer, the school's computer. It may be iReady, IXL,
Hmm.
Open Core, all of the, you can get training on that as a parent. I recently asked in my son's IEP team meeting, since his school is using a specific program, can you train me? I don't know anything about this. When he logs on at home, I want to be able to help him and support him. I don't want to spend hours looking over something and trying to figure out. So it's not just about the school being the service provider. It is also, as the parent, what can I do to learn? Because I tell you all the time, I tell my parents all the time, we have to also create a paper trail, because if we got to take it there, let's take it there where we exercise your rights, whether it's a state complaint,
Yeah.
due process, mediation. I will also tell my parents, if you need to get a lawyer, get a lawyer. But you have to know kind of what you're going in for. You have to be able to speak that language. You have to be able to prove that something is not working, because
Mhm.
it is sometimes you against them.
Yeah.
And lightening the tone. I tell my families, I'm coming in as your advocate, but I'm also here to be a neutral party, because I
I
want to
like
make
it.
the team better than where it started. It does not always mean
Hmm.
that there's anything wrong, but sometimes when I tell the parents about their rights, then that's the frustration, because they feel like they've been wrong. So I also have to say, I know that you feel like you've been wrong, and we're going to ask to rectify this.
Yeah.
I just need you to come in, and we're going to be neutral, that we are serving at the pleasure of your students. So that's what we're holding everybody accountable to. And sending a thank you letter, doing things that kind of ease the tension,
Mhm.
even when you're frustrated. I have been on a team where I boohoo cried, but when it was all said and done, when I called them out, I also said thank you. I said thank you for
Yeah.
the opportunity to listen, and I hope that nobody else has to go through what I'm going through. But I do appreciate the fight. I do appreciate
Yeah.
it. Um,
Yeah.
and it's not always pleasant. It's not always, because again, you have parents who feel that they've been wronged when they're learning. Like, I didn't know I could request a team meeting during the year. So when they come to
Yeah.
team meetings, they like, look, I could have been had a meeting, and then I'm like,
Yeah.
I know it's okay. And
Yeah.
sometimes the school teams also, and I'll even jump in and say, let's change the tone a little bit. Like, we're talking about a human being. We're still talking
Yeah.
about a student. We're not going to highlight all the negatives. We're not going to be um microaggressive in our tone and what we're talking about, especially in the IEPs. That's one thing about Empower SPED that kind of sets me apart from a lot of other, organizations, because I make sure that we do not lose that human aspect in that IEP.
I love
That's
it.
good. Yeah.
Like,
That
I
is
don't like
awesome.
reading IEPs when they said the child should and they need to. Like, they need to self advocate. They need to know how to behave. And like, who are we talking about? That's not
Right.
encouraging. And if the student were to see this and read this about themselves, how would they feel? How would they feel looking at this language that we're putting in?
Yep.
Um, so just making sure that we have a neutrality, and we have a team effort. Like, we are all a team. We are all here to make sure that this student gets the best that they need. And tensions run high, and I know it's a lot of things that the schools probably want to say but they can't say.
Mhm.
We've probably all been in teams where it might be the teacher or the special educator. It's just like, I wish I could say it, but they can't say it. Um, so
Yeah.
we really have to band together. That's one of the long term goals with Empower SPED, is to really get the parents before they leave and go to another school, really get them involved to help um, collaborate and connect and ease that tension between them and, service providers, the IEP chair, whomever, because in essence, you really don't want that. It's already stressful enough sometimes having a child with a disability. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I, the school, and then they come home and they're probably the most freest. So, it's
Yeah.
stressful. And then as they grow, things change. And then you have
Constantly.
students like, I love my main focus is K through 5. And I love the older students. But those students, once they become a very aware and conscious, it's hard, it's challenging. So we
Mm-hmm.
gotta include them in the IEP process, have them speak and learn to advocate for themselves, have them kind of share as they get older what ways work for them. And then if they're older and they're not verbal or there's just other factors, how can we make sure that we are still adhering to that social expectation of their age, right? Like not making them feel isolated or like I have older students who don't want assistive technology sometimes because they don't want people to know what's going on. So how
Mm-hmm.
do we accommodate that? Like we have to come and make sure that our students, their needs are still being addressed, but we're being mindful of where they are socially, because that's a big thing too. That is a big thing. Some kids don't want, I don't want the help, I don't need it, I'm okay,
Yeah. This
things.
has been so amazing. While
Wow,
I
it
sit and I
has.
listen to you,
Yes.
I go back to one of Grayson's teacher put a lot of, it was just a ton of negative stuff in his IEP, all the behaviors, everything that he's done. I had them to remove everything because the IEP is based on his educational plan, not his behavior. So I made them take everything that they said that was negative about his behavior out of there. So that's another thing. When we don't know how far to go or what we're able to do, we won't do it. And that IEP, that language would have carried to the next school, to the next
Mm-hmm.
grade, to the next teacher. And I said, no, we're going to change that. But I know we're at time. I got a quick question.
Mm-hmm.
A parent posted in social media that her child was going into kindergarten, and the school insisted on not having an IEP, but switching the IEP over to a 504. Is there a big difference from going from a 504, going from an IEP to a 504?
I mean, yes, it is. In essence,
Mm-hmm.
your 504 is your civil right. And that's protected. And the 504 with the schools can be a formal or informal. Like you have to come to the school with a diagnosis typically for a 504. With the IEP, it is kind of determined eligible. So you may or may not have a school based diagnosis. My personal, and this is my personal opinion, my personal education, just my experience and being a black mother, right? Accountability is real big, and that's the difference between a 504 and an IEP. Sometimes we need extra layers of accountability that we get in the IEP. We get very individualized support. The modifications and the accommodations are written out. You can still get accommodations and modifications with the 504. A lot of the times, though, in my experience, my question is who is holding it accountable? The
Got
process is
it.
a little different. When your child's civil right is violated with a 504, it's a different process. You can file a state complaint, but it's a civil rights complaint. It is not special education. It is not an IEP. So there are some legal ramifications that make it different. And I'm not saying every child needs an IEP. I'm not saying that at all.
Hmm.
But when it
People
comes
need it.
down to sometimes the accountability, it is best if your child is determined eligible, it's best to just go ahead and get that IEP.
IEP.
And then if they test out and they are determined not eligible after a certain time, then you have the 504. And the 504 could help the students with um extracurricular activities.
Mhm.
Thank you so much, Gwendolyn. um, you have support for extracurricular activities. You have maybe support on field trips, getting through the school building, all the things. It could be accommodations. It may not modify the curriculum, though, and that's the benefit of the IEP. That curriculum can be modified and it can be provided in at the instructional level that your student is currently on. 504 won't guarantee you that.
I'll take the IEP, Alex, for 100.
Yes, but of
Mhm.
course, not every child is going to be eligible. So I want to
Right.
say that, not every child is going to be eligible for an IEP.
But if
But
they
in
are, they
most
need to get it.
cases, though, it's very rare. Like I will say this, parents know their kids. And I'm
Mhm.
not
Mhm.
saying that it won't ever happen, but the majority of the times when the parents need an IEP, they're on the money. Like most parents, because most parents don't come out of the clear blue saying, I think my child needs an IEP. Most of the times, if the
Mhm.
parents are at the table, they know something. They don't have the language
Mhm.
to express and say what is going on. They may not have an understanding, or you may have a child who has not been in the medical system at all, but certain things are manifesting as soon as they get into school. And then
Mhm.
you're like, oh my goodness, what does this mean? And I have a lot of clients as well. We get the IUP based on eligibility, and then they're going back to the clinical setting and getting diagnosis.
This has been I can talk to you like all
Love
night.
it. I love
No,
it.
and I have Shawnee's number because I definitely, I mean, based off of what I'm going through with the school now and Morgan's last year, again, I don't even care. This is her last year. They probably like, listen, we done got over on you all these years. I'm like, well,
Mhm.
this is you're
Nope.
not
Let
getting
me have
over
that
on me.
team meeting right now. Put in my email, and I want to discuss these things,
Yeah, I
and then
already
on the
sent it. I
timeline.
sent it last night.
I know that's right.
So
Yes,
Shanice, I may be calling you. I'm for real because at this point
sure.
now, I'm definitely. I know some people may say, "Well, you should have done this long time ago," or "I didn't know." I didn't
Right.
know. We having a podcast coming on that we found out some stuff. Me and Bunny found out some stuff, and so
Hmm.
I'm like, okay, let me get on it. So
Yeah.
I don't, again, for me, I'm just like, I'm gonna squeeze that lemon. I'm gonna squeeze every ounce of juice out of that lemon before she,
Absolutely.
yes, before she get out of school. And we're gonna have
Hmm.
us some sweet lemonade. So
And
I
it's
don't care.
and the
Yeah,
listen,
I don't
it's
care what anybody
unfortunate.
says.
It's unfortunate too that a lot of us are connected in the medical system and the school system, and these two systems do not connect and meet.
They don't.
So it's just like, even to your point, you could go to your daughter's doctor and they could tell you all of the speech and language supports that are available, and you're like, what?
Hmm.
I didn't know that. And then you go to the school and they're like, no, we don't do that here. We don't do that.
Exactly.
And you're like, well, but these two systems do not connect at all. They are not
Yeah.
in conversation. They are not in collaboration a lot of times.
And they should be
And they
because
should be.
one side affects the other side.
Yes,
From a
Yep.
medical
absolutely.
standpoint, if this is happening with her from a medical standpoint, chances are it's going to impede on her education. So it definitely should, but it's like you say, it doesn't. Again, that's where the lack of understanding comes
Mhm.
from. But that's where, as parents, I just urge parents, please, as soon if your child has been diagnosed with a disability, and these are my closing remarks, if
Mhm.
your child has been diagnosed with a disability and that child is going and they're getting infant and toddlers and they're going in and they anticipate them being on an IEP, contact Shanice. I'm not kidding. It's going to be, if you're investing in your child's lifespan, the education, everything, I wish I had a lot of this stuff right in the beginning. I do. Because what you fail to realize is that 3-year old is going to be 8 one day. That 8-year old is going to be 18 one day. And when they're graduating from school, you don't want to put them in a place where they're fully dependent on you. They're not independent. They could have done a lot of stuff that the school has not prepared them for. You all could have collaborated, worked hand in hand to make that child reach its highest potential. And that, again, you don't ever want to limit your child or let anybody else limit him, because a lot of the times when we, especially for me, I'm gonna be honest, when Morgan was first born and they said she wouldn't do this, she wouldn't do that, she wouldn't do that, I believed them. I believe them. And so some don't be afraid to say, Dag, I did believe that. I believe them until Morgan starts showing me just what she could do. So don't let that be the case with you. I got started a lot later with Morgan. Morgan has come a long way. I'm not complaining because ultimately God has the last and only say so that matters. However, from a practical human standpoint, and I'm sure if you're your parent, you want to invest in your child. You want to do the best for your child that you can. With that being said, contact Shanice. That's all I can
Absolutely.
say.
Yep. And you
Contact
can reach
Shanice.
me at
Shanice, put it in the
www.empowersped.com.
chat.
Yep. Put it in the chat.
Y'all put it in
And
the chat.
okay, hold on. Let me
Anybody that comes to me that asks me, do I know anybody? I'm going to point them in your direction.
thank you.
Now, I'm curious
For
because a lot
sure.
of what you're saying, I've been at this for 20 years and I still have never heard of a lot of this stuff. I just
Yeah.
haven't.
And you again, I guess the motto is you don't know what you don't know.
You don't.
And don't be upset that don't know. But that is what Empower SPED is here for. We are here to really teach you, guide you, help advocate for your child, make the relationships on the team better. And if I join your village with Empower SPED, hopefully the goal is for you to come back and reach back in and help those other parents, help the school system. I'm working on in the next couple of years really making some group efforts so that I can have parents that I've helped come in and support other parents, but then we eventually help students who don't have parental representation, because that's a big group of students who are probably not getting what they need. You can imagine a student who has their parent support versus who doesn't. If they're not telling mom and dad what's going on, you think they supporting this student who doesn't have representation. So
I would love
I'm
to
not
have a
able to put it in the
seminar.
chat. So I don't know. It says the comment failed. So if you can put it in there for me,
Sure.
it's just
I would love
www.empowersped.com.
I would love to have a seminar and have you there speaking. I'm serious because um parents need to know. So is this
Absolutely.
it? www.empowersped.com.
www.empowersped.com. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so Bunny, did you have any closing remarks? Guys, I know we've gone over 17 minutes, but I love Shanice. This is not going to be the last time that you
Yes.
come with
Thank
us.
you.
I would
Yeah.
love for you to come back. I mean, we couldn't let the conversation go. This was
Right.
so good. And when I met Shanice at the expo, I was like, you have got to be on the podcast
Absolutely.
because she just has so much information. And again, I would love to have you back on the show at a later time. I would love for if we had an expo in the future for you to come and for you to talk to our parents again. You all the information you're giving is so awesome, and I really appreciate you joining us
And
tonight.
thank you. And thank you for all that you all do. I mean, we do not have a hub, like you all to really help find resources and connect with community. So I love what you're doing, and the fact that you're just building this platform and this moment of like, look, you don't have to operate in silo. A lot of your guests come from different backgrounds and they have different specialties, and I love that you were the hub. So thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored, and I'm
And we're
looking
gonna be
forward
we're gonna
to.
be attached at the hip. This is
Yes,
why I
for
say keep
sure.
Absolutely. Yes.
I'm
Yes.
gonna be contacting you,
Yes,
Charlie. I'm serious.
for
Yes,
sure.
buddy. Did you have any closing remarks?
This has just been amazing. I don't think we've gone over this
This
late in a
we haven't.
long time.
We
I
haven't.
mean, we
We
were
haven't.
just talking good, organic conversation,
Yes.
a lot of knowledge. So thank you so much. And Paula, just know that even in your 20 years of maybe some things that you did not know for Morgan, you helped me a lot. So you poured into me
Yeah.
and you empowered me enough to stand up and advocate and fight for my grandson. So, whatever you did not know for Morgan, God is taking her through and working things out. But your work with advocacy is pouring into people like me, giving us enough boldness to stand up and advocate for our
Mhm.
loved ones. So, thank you,
Oh,
Paula, and
thank
also thank
you.
you, Shanice. This has
Yes,
been
absolutely.
Thank
amazing.
Yes, thank you so
Yes,
much, guys, for joining us. And again, call Shanice.
Yes.
yes.
Y'all have a great weekend.
Yes, take care. Happy
Okay.
Juneteenth.
Oh,
Bye
yes, happy
bye.
Juneteenth.